Well, the Pac-12 tried to be innovative and forward-thinking with the Pac-12 Network. Yeah, it kind of flopped. And now they have an opportunity to make the same mistake again.
Are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights free and beloved Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. So if you remember back to 2011-12, whenever the Pac-12 Network launched, it was going to be a unique idea. It was going to be an idea that was different from what all the other conferences were doing. It was going to be forward thinking. The network was going to be owned by the Pac-12. They would make their money directly. They wouldn't have to go through somebody like ESPN or Fox, who own shares of the other conference networks, and they wouldn't have to do this revenue sharing and all that sort of stuff. They were trying to be ahead of the curve on that front. Now, they find themselves, the Pac-12 do, in a precarious situation here. We've long talked about here on the show about how Apple and or Amazon are expected to be involved in the Pac-12 media deal. That is a new concept because neither one is currently involved in broadcasting college athletics. So having a major streamer involved is something that the Pac-12, based on the reporting we've seen to this point, is going to be pursuing and is something that is going to be new in the college sports landscape from a broadcasting standpoint. Now, in 2011, when the Pac-12 Network launched, or 2012, I forget which year it was, but when that network launched, it was seen as being ahead of the times in some way. And now the Pac-12 is in a situation where it's a fascinating predicament to be in, because they're in kind of a similar spot where they're going to be making a decision based on what the details of this upcoming media rights deal that we'll hear about in 6 years for, what it'll be, where you could look back and say that was a brilliant move and it was ahead of the times and forward thing, or it was a terrible move and they should have done X, Y, and Z. And until we let things actually play out, I know this is very hard for people on the internet, until things actually play out and we give this years to go back in time and actually assess, we can't really know for sure what's going to happen on that front. So my thought here comes from a piece that I saw on thestreet.com, and there were quotes from some ESPN executives in there, and it's pretty short, so I wanted to read it here. It's by a guy named Colin Salau. He published it on May 2nd, if you want to go check it out for yourself. He says, as streaming services have taken over the media landscape, live sports have kept traditional TV channels afloat, and ESPN's business continues to create most of its revenue on these channels. But time will tell when ESPN will move most of its material to direct-to-consumer service, and ESPN chairman Jimmy Pitaro admitted such in an interview with Bloomberg. He said, quote, we're going to get to a point where we take our entire network, our flagship programming, and make it available direct to consumer, Pitaro told Bloomberg. That's a when, not an if. We're only going to do it when it makes sense for our business and for our bottom line. Now is certainly not the time for ESPN to make the move, given it's generated $28 billion from TV viewership last year. But with ESPN's subscriber count down 25 million in the last decade and the company losing millions in the last year, the push for change is mounting. It's continuing to invest in ESPN Plus, which had nearly 23 million subscribers as of Q3 2022. ESPN's biggest move in streaming could be with the NBA when it negotiates the next media rights deal of the league starting 2025. Pitaro is, quote, confident that ESPN and the NBA will, again, quote, see eye to eye on where they can pursue streaming live games of the league, likely on the ESPN Plus platform. If ESPN does move to streaming, it would be a massive domino to fall for cable and traditional TV channels and could be the beginning of a definitive switch to streaming. So this puts the Pac-12 in the same kind of spot. And I don't think that they can fully anticipate what's going to happen and when. But you heard Pitaro say in there, it's a when, not an if, they move their flagship programming, their biggest games, to ESPN Plus to stream and go direct to consumer and just bypass cable companies and that entire option. Now, when that is, I'm not sure if this factors into the Pac-12's calculations here, but many of you have expressed numerous concerns about the potentially streaming heavy deal that the Pac-12 could have. If this move, they're still making a lot of money, as the article referenced, off of, cable TV and live sports and whatnot. But if this move is going to happen within the next 5 to 10 years, I have to imagine that is part of the calculation for network executives and the Pac-12 as well, as they try to figure out this deal. And the reason I compare it to the Pac-12 network back then is because there's kind of a brief glimpse into the future for what it could look like and how you could foresee it playing out, but you don't know for certain. That's how it was with the Pac-12 network. Like, oh yeah, I see how this could work. I see how this could be beneficial. But right now it feels like this. And then it ended up not working out, right? Because not being on DirecTV was a really, really poor decision for the conference and the media rights and all that sort of stuff. And we've been over that, ad nauseum here on the show. But now, in a world where sports are the thing that we all watch live on cable television right now, if it moves, broadly speaking, into an even more streaming heavy world, then if the Pac-12 were to have a deal that's more streaming than the other conferences, there's a chance it could absolutely backfire 100%. Where you could look at it and it's like, no, sports are still really, really fun to watch and people like them, and linear networks are still the primary way they get that. And if you had a deal that was 60 to 70% streaming, that would be not great for your biggest sporting events from a TV numbers and exposure standpoint, although the TV numbers at that point would not be the concerns of the conference because they'd get paid regardless. Because the whichever streaming service or network, it's then let's say it's Amazon, right? Or Apple. Let's just say it's Apple because they kind of seem the most likely right now. If Apple pays the Pac-12 for their media rights, it's then Apple's job, not the Pac-12's job, to get people to be able to watch their games and subscribe to their streaming service and whatnot. But I found this dichotomy fascinating of streaming is really big right now, but could it be even bigger in the live sports space in, 7 to 10 years or something? If the Pac-12 signs a deal that, or is it 5 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? Like Pitaro saying it's when, not if, they make it available on ESPN Plus and they go with flagship programming over to ESPN Plus. That would be a ground shaking move in the broadcast media industry. And then having a big streaming deal might not be so risky, right? Or have such downsides in terms of the concerns that some people have expressed that I don't share entirely, but I do see partially where people are coming from on that front. So I found that to be really, really interesting. Thought that I would share. The title of the article, by the way, is ESPN Gets Closer to a Move That Will Kill Cable. Cord cutting is a real thing. It's a very real thing, but the one thing that's kind of keeping cable, viable in some sense is live sports. College football, of course, falls into that particular category. But curious what you all think. Drop the YouTube comments below as always, or hit me up on Twitter at smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12. So a day that I've been waiting for quite a while has finally arrived. And I just want to dip my toe into the water on that particular subject. But I don't dip my toe into the water on Built Bars. I'm all in on Built Bars because I've always got one in my golf bag, in my pantry. They are healthy. They taste amazing. They're covering 100% real dark chocolate. I honestly don't know how Built Bar does this stuff. They taste so good, but they're good for you. You can't find many things like that in life. It's really hard to do. They've written entire cookbooks on how to do that, make healthy stuff taste good. But Built has done it, and they've got a bunch of yummy flavors. Churro, peanut butter brownie, mint brownie, cookies and cream. Only 4 grams of sugar and 130 calories with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Got everything you need in a protein bar. You can get a 4-box of cookies and cream in the pharmacy section at Walmart. You can get a 13-bar box at Sam's Club. You can get specialty flavors at Built.com. Again, Walmart, Sam's Club, Built.com. Go get your next order of Built Bars today, and you can thank me later. All right. Let's reset and refocus. The day that I've been waiting for, that has finally arrived. Pac-12 football over-under win totals have been posted by our friends at FanDuel. I have so many thoughts. I mean, so many thoughts. We might talk about nothing else all next week except over-under win totals for football because I can't get enough of this stuff. Great barometer for how Vegas feels teams are looking going into next year, picking the over and under totals and whatnot. I have a few thoughts here. We're not going to hit all the heavy hitters today. That would be like a 2-hour show. All right. And that's not how we roll here at the Locked On Network. I want to make things that fit into your commute. All you everydayers out there understand that. So I'm going to start with some sleeper bets that I like right now. I could change my mind later if more or new information comes in, if more transfers, end up emerging, someone gets injured or all that sort of stuff. But right now, here are the bets that stand out the most to me. Again, this is courtesy of our friends at FanDuel, proud sponsor here at the Locked On Podcast Network. There are 2 in particular that I don't want any part of. I mean, I would not put my money on either side. It would be too much of a sweat. It might be riveting, but it'd be too much of a sweat. Washington State, 6.5. I'm terrified. My biggest fears in life go as follows. Snakes, needles, trying to bet Washington State 6.5 over under win total. It's 1, 2, 3. It's very simple. So not going to touch that one. That is a perfect line for the Cougs. They were 7-5 a year ago. You lose both your coordinators. You've replaced them well. Ben Arbuckle coming over from Western Kentucky shows some very real promise and, was very productive over there with the Hilltoppers over in the Bluegrass State. Now he goes up to Pullman. He's got Cam Ward back. They've got some solid weapons. I have questions about the offensive line. I don't have questions about the defense. They did lose Day and Henley, but they've got, I trust Jake Dickert to build a defense there. That's all he's done since arriving at Washington State is build a good, consistent defense. So 6.5 with the schedule that they've got. They've got Wisconsin coming to Pullman. They've got Wisconsin's going to be a preseason top 25 team, most likely. And they will be in Pullman week 2. What a huge, huge game that is. What a huge win that was last year for Washington State. Unfortunately for the Cougs, they weren't able to follow it up with a highly successful season, but they were solid, right? They were 7-5, lost their coordinators, got housed by Fresno State in the bowl game. One of the few correct Pac-12 prime picks I gave out last year was not great. We ended the year under 500. We don't like that. Definitely trying to get back over 50% on the Pac-12 prime picks there, but not going to try and do that with Washington State's over-under win total. 6.5, not touching it. Here's another one I'm staying away from. Arizona at 4.5. Here's why I'm staying away from Arizona at 4.5. Jed Fish is going into year 3. You've got Jaden DeLora back there at quarterback. You've got T-Mac on the outside. You've added some nice transfer players. Things have done nothing but improve in Tucson over the last couple of years since Jed Fish took over. They ended the losing streak. They won 5 games a year ago. They played some teams really tight, including Washington State, by the way, that, if they win that game, they're bowl eligible all of a sudden. They'd be a really easy pick for a bowl eligible 2023 season. The reason I'm staying away from Arizona here is why in the world, why does Vegas think they're a pullback team compared to what they were a year ago? They went over their win total by 2.5, right? Their over-under win total was 2.5. It was the easiest over I gave out here on the show. Over. duh. And Oregon State was at 5.5, I think it was. And I was like, yeah, that's an over right there. Both of those hit. But Arizona at 4.5, that's how I feel. Flabbergasted, absolutely flabbergasted. So I'm not touching those. Now, there are three that I love. There are three that I look at. I'm going to save my favorite one for last because it's going to surprise you. First, UCLA under 8.5. Hammer it. Hammer it. I am not coming on here hating on the Bruins because this is their final year in the Pac-12, and there are many of you who would like to see them flounder this year and in the Big Ten and whatnot. Not why. UCLA last year was a 9-3 regular season football team. They also lost their bowl game to Pitt, so they were 9-4. They don't have Dorian Thompson-Robinson anymore. That guy was not good. He was very good. Very, very good. And a unique athlete. And Chip Kelly's offenses have always been at their best when they've got an athletic quarterback. So between Colin Schlee, Ethan Garbers, and Dante Moore, I don't know much about Schlee, full disclosure, haven't really dove into my prep on him at this point in time because we don't know who's going to win the quarterback battle. We have no idea. But that's my point. How often do you go into spring football with an open up to 3-way quarterback battle and emerge on the other side with 9 or more wins in the regular season? I don't see it. I absolutely do not see it. Remember, these are regular season win totals, not factoring in the bowl games here. Does UCLA have a tough schedule? No. They do go at San Diego State. That's their toughest non-conference game. They could have 3 wins there. But you tell me they're going to go 6-3 against this loaded Pac-12 when they're trying to incorporate a new quarterback? I do like some of the transfers they've brought in. Maliki Matavao, tight end from Oregon. J. Michael Sturdivant, wide receiver from Cal. I mean, they've got some interesting pieces there, to be sure. But 8.5? 8.5, that seems high. That seems really high to me. I would hammer UCLA under 8.5. So that's a bet I actually like. Here's another one, and I'm sorry, Cardinal fans. It's this is going to be a little bit painful. Stanford under 3.5. Stanford was a 3-win football team last year. They should not have beaten Arizona State, and they should not have beaten Notre Dame. Those were 2 of their wins. Does anyone think Stanford, a team that is not able to at this point in time utilize the transfer portal, is going to be a better football team when you have also a quarterback battle going into the spring between 2 guys who don't look like the quarterbacks of the future? Like, this is a long rebuild for Troy Taylor at Stanford. He should be given ample time. And he has a clear offensive identity. That's what David Shaw struggled with. But Stanford across the board, they are not what they used to be. They don't have, I think, an ingrained level or an existing level of talent that is sufficient to where they just need better coaching schematics to be better than a season ago. I just don't see it. So they were 3-9 last year. If they're as good as they were a season ago, I think that'd be a fine year one for Troy Taylor. He might be going back and forth between 2 quarterbacks all year. He did that at Sacramento State, and I see no reason why he couldn't do that again. So if he doesn't have one guy who clearly takes the starting quarterback job. So I struggle to get excited about Stanford. I think they could be good in the long run if Taylor knows what he's doing and how to build a Stanford football program in the modern era, which is certainly not an easy thing to do. But, there's always a but, right? I think the Pac-12 is just too good for them this year. There's too much talent. Their non-conference schedule, they've got Notre Dame again. They've Notre Dame, that's a loss. Just go through their schedule really, really quick here. Stanford begins the year, week 1, by the way, at Hawaii. Now, Hawaii is not a good Mountain West program, but Pac-12 schools have lost to lesser opponents than Hawaii before. But let's say they pick up that win. All right, then they go at USC week 2. That's a loss. Sacramento State at home. All right, yeah, that could be a win. But Arizona, Oregon, I think you have significantly better offenses and maybe even better teams overall. I don't know about Arizona's defense this year on the other side in both of those games. You get them at home, but I don't know that you're going to have a ruckus home environment as Troy Taylor rebuilds this thing. Maybe you generate some buzz. Then Colorado's a winnable game, but Colorado, you got to go on the road. You got to go to Folsom Field. They're going to be packing the house for Dion. You know that. Then you play UCLA, that Vegas thinks is a much better team, and I tend to agree. Then you play Washington. That's a loss. At Washington State and at Oregon State. You're not winning either of those games. They're tough places to play with good football teams. Then you play Cal. I'm going to talk about Cal here in a moment. And then you close with Notre Dame. I just maybe I could see them winning 4 games. But if 4 is like their max, then yeah, I like the under. They're 3.5. Okay, here's another one I like. This is a hill I'm going to die on. This is a team I am picking here in spring football until I am presented with information otherwise. I'm going to be riding them to the extent that you can ride them. I am in on the California Golden Bears to go over 4.5 wins. Over. Just wait. You think I'm crazy now saying Cal is going to win more games than they did a year ago when they have probably upgraded offensive coordinator, have definitely upgraded a quarterback, have rebuilt their offensive line through the portal, and brought in a couple other nice pieces offensively. And you add the urgency of Justin Wilcox being in year 6, might need to get bowl eligible at least to keep his job. And guess what? I think Cal's going to do it. I really, really do. So I love Cal over 4.5 wins. So the do not touch bets. Washington State 6.5, Arizona 4.5. I wouldn't touch them. But the bets I love, just at the outset here, again, I'm not even diving into all of these. We're going to be talking about this stuff all next week. Cal over 4.5, UCLA under 8.5, Stanford under 3.5. Those are the ones I like. Curious as to your thoughts. Let me know in the YouTube comments or shoot me a note on Twitter at smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12. This question came in via the direct messages from Alex. He said, hey, another question for the pod. What are your predictions for tiers of Pac-12 men's basketball teams next season? Seems like multiple teams have been making noise in the offseason, Cal and USC, for instance. As a Cal fan, I've been pleasantly surprised with the coaching hires and transfers recently under Madsen. Could see Cal becoming a much improved team next season. Thanks. So let's group this into 3 tiers. Top tier, teams that on their best day could win a regular season Pac-12 championship in 2023 in men's basketball. Tier 2 can contend with those teams, but are not consistent enough to be able to really contend for a conference title. And tier 3, another bad season, and the coach is probably out of there. Let's start from the bottom and work our way up. Tier 3, I think you have Oregon State. I think Coach Tinkle had a great run to the Elite 8, and Oregon State is just giving him some time to lessen the buyout on his contract. And I don't see Oregon State as a program that is, currently or capable of making the sorts of moves to move them up the ladder or move them up tiers. So I think Oregon State's in the bottom. Also in the bottom tier, I've got Stanford down here. Stanford has not been very good under Jared Haas. They never have been, and they're giving him another year. And I think it's, a bit like Carl Durrell with Colorado football, David Shaw with Stanford football. They're going to give it another year. And when it doesn't start to go well, you might see a change made in the middle of the season. Those 2 definitely bottom tier teams. Now, Utah is a curious one. So is Washington State. I tend to have more faith in Washington State, but here's the problem for the Cougs. They're losing a lot. TJ Bamba is gone. The name of the other player who hit the portal, went to USC, is slipping my mind. Kyle Smith actually was talking recently on the radio very openly about how he's basically saying like it's hard to coach at Washington State nowadays because they don't have as much money to throw around as other places do with NIL. So it's hard to keep guys interested in being a Cougar. And, Washington State wasn't good for most of last year. They got hot at the end of the year, but now they've lost some key guys. Kind of low on the Cougs. I'd put them maybe at the top of tier 3, but I think Washington State could be down in that particular realm. Utah's the same sort of thing. Like they were so good, but then they fell off so hard. I would put them closer to tier 3 than I would in tier 2. So I want to split these up kind of like 4, 4, and 4. So bottom tier, I think Oregon State and Stanford are below Utah and Washington State, who have got more potential. But I think those are your bottom 2 teams in the conference. Spencer, where's Cal? Just you wait. All right, let's move into tier 2. Arizona State, kind of a prove it year for Bobby Hurley. They gave him a small contract extension. He got to the tournament. He's lost a lot of guys to the portal. We'll talk about that more with Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils on tomorrow's show. But yeah, tough spot for Arizona State to be in after all the positive momentum. They had so many great moments. But with Bobby Hurley, the highs have been high, the lows have been low, but I'll give them benefit of the doubt because they made the tournament. So I'll put them in tier 2. Colorado's in there as well. Colorado has consistently been a tier 2 program in the Pac-12. They could get to the tournament if they do well enough in their non-conference schedule, that is, but they're never really vying for a Pac-12 regular season title. And it doesn't feel like, they're the sort of team that has got the potential to do that. They might, though. They have this Williams kid coming in. His brother was a lottery pick, by the way. Yeah. I'm just, throwing things out there and whatnot, letting them fester. Also in tier 2, Washington. Now, do I have a lot of faith in Mike Hopkins? No, not particularly. In fact, I should probably have Washington at the bottom of tier 2, almost into tier 3. I don't have a lot of trust in Hopkins and what he's done there at this point. However, at the end of last year, they had some moments. And he's going to be coaching with a lot of urgency at a program that I don't think is, a basketball school by any means, but I think demands more urgency more than Jared Hass at Stanford. I think both those guys, along with Wayne Tinkle at Oregon State, are in prove-it years. And if you had to give me one who's going to emerge and do enough to keep his job for at least another season, I would take Hopkins at UW. I would take Hopkins at UW. Utah also here in tier 2. Along with Colorado and Washington. And who does that leave me to, or in Arizona State? Who does that put me in tier? Oh, yeah, that's right. So I guess I'm not doing a perfect 4-4 split here because, yeah, I kind of thought about I was going to, but then I was like, I don't know if I could really do that. Here in tier 2 is Cal. Yes, that Cal. I'm suddenly becoming a Cal Bears fan by default, it seems. But Cal has added 3 players worthy of note. The first one, whom you should know, is a guy by the name of Jalen Cone, who's very small. I also was broadcasting a game in which he scored 45 points at the mid-major level in a top 12 basketball conference in the country in the Western Athletic Conference, according to Ken Palm, against a team that was the number 2 seed, by the way. Yeah, Jalen Cone can ball. Fardaz Amac, yeah, that's a player. Keontae Kennedy, yeah, that's a player too, who comes over from Memphis, 9-point-a-game scorer in the American. That's a good league. Yeah, suddenly Cal's kind of got some guys. Yeah, Cal's in tier 2. Now, I don't know how good they'll be, but I know they won't be a tier 3 team. I just don't see it. I think Mark Madsen's too good of a coach, which leaves us with tier 1. And I do have 4 teams in there. I guess I have 4, 4, and 4. I guess I do have that. I just forgot how to count. I'm trying to striate stuff. I've got all my teams written out. Anyway, you get the point. Top tier: Arizona, UCLA, USC, Oregon. Oregon is at the bottom of tier 1. Oregon is at the bottom of tier 1. They are bringing in an immensely talented class, but they just keep underachieving the last couple of years under Dana Altman. Why? There are a myriad of questions, and that's a long explanation. But I think USC bringing in a lot of big-time recruits, bringing in Bronny James as well, who we talked about earlier this week on the show. I trust Mick Cronin. I trust Tommy Lloyd to contend for a conference championship. And look, Dana Altman had a down season this year. Oregon was the number 4 seed in the Pac-12. By the time the regular season came to a close, they knocked off Arizona. They, are still capable of being really good, but I just don't trust them at a high level. But I think they've got a better likelihood than anybody in tier 2 to get back to that conference championship level. So tier 3, I've got Washington State, I've got Oregon State, I've got Stanford, and that's where I got my my numbers a tad mixed up. I'm going to throw Utah in there because I think they could be primed for a pullback. Those are my 4 Tier 3 teams. Tier 2, Washington, Arizona State, Cal, Colorado. And then Tier 1, Oregon, Arizona, USC, and UCLA in their final campaign in the Pac. Great question. Keep them coming. YouTube comments or on Twitter at smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12. Back with you tomorrow. Appreciate everyone listening. And until then, have a wonderful rest of your day.